So first thing I want to do when I joined this group about 6 months ago, after many years of having filled out applications that never got sent in and sat around on shelves and whatever else. And finally, when I saw that membership application was online, I jumped on it. This is a case of not knowing my audience, literally. And you not knowing me. So I will start with a little bit of a personal introduction and then dive into the presentation. As Eric said, I'm willing to take questions. If you want to put things in chat, if I see them, I will try to answer them as we go, or we can hold off till any natural break points. So I'm an Ohio native. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. I have a somewhat of a New England connection in that my father grew up in Wakefield on the north side of Boston along the B&M. And he was a lifelong modeler, and I inherited that directly from about as early as I can remember. I really took an interest in the Maine Central in the early 1970s after we took one of our summer vacations to Maine, which we did every couple of years, and spent a week camping in a tent in the fog near Rockland. And we passed time by playing cards and wandering around the yards and doing whatever else you do in the foggy days in the midsummer. I went off to college, graduate school, far too many years of school, had a career as a petroleum geologist. And through all that time, I did a lot of moving from place to place, never being anywhere more than 7 years. And during that time, I had various proto freelance layouts that got to various stages of incompletion, mostly New England themes, but only one of them really got to completion, and that was the one I tore down. I tore down in 2015. In 2017, I found myself being moved to Golden, Colorado, and finally having the space to build a model of something I wanted to build for many, many years. And to show how many years it's been, the track plan on the right, which is hard to read and probably not worth reading, I drew in 1972, so it's 50 years old on a piece of graph paper, and so this has been stirring in my mind for a long time. In 2022, I retired middle of 2022, so now I have pretty much all my time to spend on working on layouts and other train related things. I volunteer a lot at the Colorado Railroad Museum. I found it kind of funny that the two of the last three programs were about things in my backyard. So now I get to call from here and talk to you guys about something that's right in your backyard. So as I go through, I'll probably say things that are wrong, or things that I don't know. If you have information that you want to share with me on that, I'm more than willing to accept it. You guys probably know this area. You certainly know this area better than I do, most of you. Okay, so what I want to do is talk about prototype modeling of the Rockland branch in 1951. And as we go through this, you'll see that there's kind of a mixture of things I'm trying to do accurately, things I'm guessing at, and things I've just had to compromise about for various logistical reasons. And I'll mention a few of those as we go through here. But what I really want to do is I want to kind of talk about the motivation of this layout and building it, and give you a tour of what is hopefully some familiar territory. So as I said, this is something I've wanted to model for a long time. I knew even as a 13-year-old in 1972 that it would be an ideal model subject. And some of the criteria that I kind of set for myself when I started designing this layout is I wanted a branch line, but not a sleepy one, not a one train a day branch. I wanted one that had a fair amount of activity. I like modeling the transition era. I like a mixture of freight and passenger, a variety of industries. I wanted to, as a friend of mine said, get my feet a little wetter. I wanted to do waterfronts and water scenes, which I'd never modeled before. And rural New England is always in autumn is always a appealing subject for me. We try to get back or get to New England every couple of years if we can in October. So the other thing was the time frame, and you guys probably mostly know all these various criteria. Basically, what I was trying to balance was a mixture of steam and diesel and a mixture of green and maroon paint schemes. Can't really do both of them very well if you're going to pick a specific date. So I opted for the steam and diesel, 1951. At that point, there were still two round trip passenger trains on the branch. It was pretty busy. This particular dispatcher sheet, which came out of one of George Belvin's books, is September of '53, and there were 12 trains a day, all during the daylight time, which is a pretty that would qualify as a main line in some places. So I've chosen October of 1951 as my modeling date. So I set myself some criteria at the beginning for designing this layout. And I don't know how many of you are modelers, or even beyond that, how many of you are operators. But I built this model I built this layout for operations. That is my first love in the hobby. I try to operate on layouts whenever I can. I probably operate four times a month, 3 to 4 times a month. So this layout was built for operations. As a result, it's a strictly point-to-point layout, has no continuous running, and I wanted all operators to be able to continuously follow their trains and be intimately involved with working with their trains and switching and various other things. I model an HO scale. My minimum radius for this design was 36 inches, which allows me to run full-length passenger cars reasonably well. I've suffered in the past from very narrow spaces in layouts. So I decided I wanted to have minimum aisle width of 4 feet, which means that although I have a fair amount of space, I could have put more in it, and I decided not to do that. It's built essentially as a shelf or a narrow shelf. So everywhere, except in a couple places, the maximum reach-in distance is 2 feet. As a result, everything can be done manually. All switches are manual. All uncoupling is manual. I've had to use some swing gates to provide some access points to some doors. I've tried to stick reasonably close to the actual track configurations within the confines of the space, although you'll see compromises on that for sure. And most importantly for me was I wanted to minimize layout complexity. I operate on a lot of layouts, and I see a lot of layouts where the wiring is extremely complex, the track work's extremely complex, and I wanted to avoid that. So I built a single deck layout where all track is accessible from above. There's no hidden trackage. There's minimal elevation change, which works well for this prototype, which is all within about 100 feet of sea level. The layout, the last few layouts I've built have all been built with lightweight sectional benchwork. So I used a lot of foam, insulating foam for the decking and such. As I said, everything is manual. So the wiring underneath this layout is about as simple as you can get. It's basically 2 wires, and which works for me really well. Okay, so I put this diagram together a while back, just to help myself think through what prototype modeling means. And there's, the way I see it is there's kind of a spectrum. One end of the spectrum is proto freelancing, where you're essentially trying to build a layout that's prototype based, capturing the look and feel, but all the locations and the operating scenarios are fictitious. On the other end is the point of absolute prototype fidelity, and there are people that do this, where they model actual track plans. They go to the point of, if there's not a photo of a particular building, there will be no model of that building. And some people even do no size compression. They model at essentially 1-to-1. I didn't want to go there. It's just too hard to do, especially with a branch that's 57 miles long. So for me, I'm kind of in the middle of this spectrum, I hope. Maybe at the end of this, you can judge for yourself where you think I am. But what I'm trying to emphasize is the recognizable reproduction of key scenes. So the Rockland branch, as you know, is quite scenic, and it's got some really distinctive locations. I want those locations to be recognizable. I use actual track plans where possible, but I don't have a problem with major scene compression. It's an absolute must in this particular case. I'll model actual structures where I have documentation of them, photographs mostly, and I will infill with things that look right to me. And I always leave the option, if I get information that I don't have when I build something, I can always replace it. And finally, I wanted to reproduce the operational experience. So I want to, I run the layout in a way that I think is representative of how the Maine Central did it, at least based on the documentation that I've seen. So, and I'd be interested in the input on that. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a tour of both the prototype and the layout at the same time. And but before we start that, are there any questions on that kind of introductory part before we go on? Silence. Okay, everyone's either asleep or satisfied. So you probably all know the prototype setting. The Rockland branch extends eastward from Brunswick to Rockland, and basically goes out across various waterways on its way. The other part of the layout that I'm going to show you is the Lewiston Lower branch, which went the other way from Brunswick, went up towards Lewiston, and I'll show you what I've modeled of that branch as we go. I've largely avoided modeling the lower road of the Maine Central or the main line. I only have it in that it serves to feed cars in and out of Brunswick. But my primary emphasis is on the two branches at this point. As I said, the Rockland branch portion of this is 57 miles. It's represented in my basement by about 200 feet of layout. The towns that are circled on this map are the towns I've modeled. I've left a few out, Waldoboro and Newcastle being probably the two dominant ones. And I made these choices because I wanted to emphasize the ones, first of all, that I had the most information on. Obviously, Bath, Wiscasset, Rockland all have quite a bit of documentation on them. And these were also the key traffic generating locations. So that's really what I did. I will show you a couple things I've done to add in a few elements from some of these other towns as we go on here. So this is the layout as it exists in my basement right now. The space is roughly 1,000 square feet, so it's 55 feet long and about a little less than 20 feet across from the edge of the steps down here to the back wall. And essentially, it's it's basically a folded, relatively linear layout. You can see the main line is strictly linear. It never loops back on itself. Comes down across this peninsula. One side of the peninsula is Wiscasset. The other side of the peninsula is Bath, and I'll show you how and why I've done that. We come into Brunswick, and in Brunswick we have the two Ys. The one Y that goes to the Lewiston Lower Branch down here, and the other Y that was typically not used as a Y, but that connected with the lower road headed north. The lower road is represented by basically east staging, which is here behind a low backdrop. This is a half-height backdrop right here, about a foot high. So that would represent Waterville and Bangor, and westbound west staging would represent Portland and points south would be over here. Now you can see right away I had to make one major compromise because of the fact my basement is not 300 feet long, and that was I had to mirror image part of Brunswick so that the Lewiston Lower Branch goes the wrong direction. In actuality, it should go the other direction, which would be into the wall of the house. And that was the first compromise, but I can live with that. So what we're going to do for the tour here is we're going to start in Brunswick. We're going to come up the Lewiston Lower Branch and look at some stuff along that, and then we're going to come back and we're going to take our tour out along the Rockland Branch all the way out to Rockland. Okay, so Brunswick. So I throughout the rest of this, I have a mixture of prototype photos, maps, and then the layout representation also in map form with some photographs. And you'll see various parts of the layout are in various degrees of completion. This has been it's about 6 years in, so it's still got a ways to go. Okay, so Brunswick was kind of the hub of activity for these two branches. It was a fairly decent sized yard. As I mentioned before, it had two Ys. This one, it was the Y that went to the Lewiston Branch, and this is part of the Y that basically went off to the Rockland Branch, which was this track here. You can some of the distinctive features here are the brick roundhouse with the large arched doors. I have not yet built this, but this is on my scratch building list. There was a large depot with a long passenger platform on one side of the yard, so that would have been over here, with kind of a park area and a hotel behind it, the Hotel Eagle. And then on the opposite side was the freight house, which is over here. So that would be over here on the map. And there were various industries scattered here, or businesses scattered here in the yard. The lumberyard building is still there. I'm not sure what other buildings are still standing. Most of this area is now the big grocery store, which I can't pull the name of off the top of my head right now. But anyway, there's a big grocery store that occupies a lot of this area right now. So I made no attempt to model that yard in its actual configuration, just because of the size. It's almost impossible to do things like that. So I've essentially freelanced the arrangement, the track arrangement in the yard, but I basically made the design consistent with the amount of traffic that I saw as I operate the layout. So the number of tracks that are there represent the number of the destinations, or a little greater than the various destinations of cars, and so it ends up to be an 8-track yard or something like that. It's got a small engine terminal. This will be the roundhouse, which kind of blocks the view of going into staging. It's got various industries, which probably don't reflect what was actually there, because I have not been very successful at finding information on the industries. That's been the hardest part of the research for this project. But I know there was a beer distributor. There was there was a lumber yard. There was I can't remember what else right now. But I've tried to represent the ones that I do know of. But by and large, the industries at this point are freelance. Again, as I said, I can go back and fill it. The other big compromise I've done is I wanted a coaling tower. As far as I know, there was not a current Brunswick, although I could be corrected on that. I kind of doubt there would be one, since it's pretty close to Portland. But I've put one in. I picked this one up actually from an estate, because the one I had built was too big. So here's a smaller one. One of the things you will see as you look at these pictures, and I'll discuss it now so we don't go back, is the backdrops. The backdrops on the layout are all photographic backdrops. My wife and I took a trip to Maine in October 2019, late September, early October of 2019, and I spent several days just taking photo panoramas of various locations, across farmers' fields and things to get the foliage. And then I spent a full 6 months, up until about almost the start of COVID, pasting these all together and making 250 feet of photo backdrop that I printed out full size. And in places like Brunswick, it's particularly difficult because there's very little left of what would have been there in 1950. So trying to make a backdrop of an urban setting for me involved capturing photographs of existing existing structures that would have been around at that time, as well as pictures off of Google Earth and things, and merging them all together. So this stretch of backdrop that you see on the right-hand picture, this lower right-hand picture, is probably composed of 75 to 100 individual photographs that have all been put up from various sources, that have all been put together to come up with something that I thought was plausible. And you'll see that repeatedly as we go through this. I'll mention some other things on the backdrop as we go along. These were all printed out on photographic paper and essentially cut out along the tree line. So all the sky was cut off, and then mounted with wallpaper paste on the masonite backdrop. So as we head up the Lewiston Lower Branch, the first kind of signature scene that I wanted to model was the Black Bridge over the Androscoggin. And obviously the Androscoggin's a big river. I don't have space for the entire width of the river. So you can see the prototype was a double span with the road bridge underneath. I built it as a single span. These two pictures are actually taken in opposite directions. So the model is viewed from 180 degrees from where the prototype photograph is taken. But I've tried to capture the character of the old road bridge underneath, which is a pretty unusual geometry. Sad to see it taken down a few years ago. So this scene on the model would be Route 1 coming past the east side of the bridge along the river. The next stop along the branch headed towards Lewiston was Simpson's Rips, or Pajepscot Paper, where the Pajepscot Paper Mill was located. This is one I've really struggled with because I have been very unsuccessful finding any photographs of this before it burned down and was turned into whatever it is now, a dump or recycling facility, I guess it is. And so I'm pretty much freelancing with some buildings that seem reasonable. This particular building is a composite of a Monster Model Works paper factory that's in Vermont, I believe, and a piece of an old I think it was Edison's laboratory in New Jersey, to come up with something that looks credible. This building back here is a Walters building that I'll eventually put the clear stories on to kind of represent this structure in the background, and then I have to build something to represent that building right there. It's got the obligatory stack of pulpwood that all good paper mills have, and there was also still is a large gravel pit there. I assumed that was there in 1951, so I've pasted that on the backdrop. So this is all on the backdrop. The actual front of the 3D scenery is the base where the color changes there. And for right now, this branch on the layout ends at Lisbon Falls, and that was a space consideration because I had a water heater in the way, and we like to have hot water. So I've terminated the branch at this point, and these are just some views. Here's the aerial photograph of the layout of Lisbon Falls. This was 1998. The depot and the freight house were at one end, across from the large woolen mill, the Warrnambool woolen mill, which this large building was still standing until a few years ago. The depot is still there. At the other end of this picture is the U.S. Gypsum wallboard mill, which again burned down in the, I don't know, in 90s maybe. This is another one I've had tremendous problems trying to find actual photographs of what this looked like. So I've got kind of a standalone. So there's the aerial photograph. This is the way I've modeled it. So this is the woolen mill. There's the depot. I've moved the freight house from its actual location, which was down here, to farther to the right. The gypsum mill. These are a couple of buildings I had from previous layout. I know they don't look anything like what the wallboard mill looked like, so I need to work on that. And the other point I want to make is here's the Lisbon Falls Depot, which is scratch built of wood. Essentially all except this freight house, which is a kit. Pretty much everything else, every other railroad building on the layout is scratch built from photographs. The future of this branch is it is going to get longer. So right now, Lisbon Falls is along this stretch, which is this basically one side of the stairway. So the stairs come down in this box. And what I plan to do this year is extend that and wrap it around. This is where the water heater used to be. It's now not there anymore. It's been moved. And build Lewiston lower on the other side. So this will be basically a 2-foot wide shelf on the other side, which will have the Bates textile mill, which was 5 blocks long, on one side, and other brick structures and such on the other side, with the tracks down in an alley in between. So this is my next really big project, and a few other industries will be coming out of town. Now, what this will do is Lisbon Falls, as I've built it up till now, has more to it than the actual Lisbon Falls had, and that was to compensate for the fact that I didn't have Lewiston here. Once I put Lewiston in, I'll cut back Lisbon Falls to something more like it actually is. Okay, so now we're gonna so we've gone out this way, the red track. Now we're gonna come back to Brunswick, and we're gonna head out the other way to Bath. and to Bath, and then on to Rockland. So, any questions on that portion before I move on off to the east? Okay. Okay, so the first real challenge heading out eastward is Bath. It is I would classify it as a fairly complicated place to try to model because of the geometry and the size. One thing that makes it a challenge to model is that the track is a big curve. Basically, everything curves through 90 degrees as the tracks come in and then approach the bridge over the river. And to make it even worse, the trackage that went along the waterfront takes another 90-degree bend. So you essentially have to have to model this accurately, you have to basically have the tracks go through 180-degree bend, because the coal dock along the river was over here and the freight house is over here. So that's pretty impractical to do. The other thing that makes it impractical is the shipyard is enormous. The Bath Iron Works basically would occupy the rest of my basement on the other side of the tracks. So here's some of the scenes that kind of make me want to model this. Is the beautiful brick depot, which still stands there, the Route 1 going in and essentially using the same bridge over the river. The lift bridge, here you see the entrance to the lift bridge. You've probably all been there. This was before the roadway was torn out and the road bridge was replaced. And then looking back at town, this is the old that's the freight house, which has now been restored. There's the old customs house. This was Commercial Street, and the tracks ran down the side of Commercial Street and terminated at a coal dock at the far end. So there's a lot of complexity to this, and I've struggled a lot with how to try to model this. So I'll show you what I've done. So this is the way the model is set up. I have set it on a large curve, and what I've done is I have not attempted to model the bridge in any way. What I've done is I've put the tower for the bridge and the entrance to the bridge as photographed from the tracks on the backdrop. Because the bridge itself, if I remember correctly, it's over half a mile long. So it's a pretty good size. It would be a pretty good size model. And then what I've done is I've brought the road in. So this would be representative of Route 1, wandering through town, and then coming up onto the bridge, which then covers the entrance to the backdrop over the tracks. This is all built of gator board and styrene. The road deck with PVC pieces for the supports. I've spent done a lot of work on this over the last 6 months. This has been my main focus, and so I'll point out a few things. So all these buildings along Commercial Street, all these here, these were scratch built. So this is what was the Tory roller bushing works. One of its buildings still stands. That is remnant of one of the this building next door to it still stands. That's this building, a little bit downscaled. There was a grocery supply along Commercial Street, the Prower Grocery Supply, which I have a couple poor photographs of from the backside. That's what this building in the back is. And then there's a couple other cool little buildings down the end here, which I have some photographs of. So all of these are built from photographs. This is the coal dock, which I'm currently working on. So it's only partially completed. It's just sitting in place. I haven't put the booms on or anything to go out over the river. This would be representative of one of the large crane that was typically on the other side of the tracks, at the edge of the dry docks, the Bath Iron Works dry docks. So these would be the tracks, the small yard and the tracks serving Bath Iron Works would all be along this side. And then finally is the depot. And I've always loved this depot. I've photographed it many times. But when it got to building this, I wasn't quite sure how I was going to build it, because I don't have the equipment to do all the arched windows and things like that. I found a guy in Florida. A friend of mine put me on to a guy in Florida who custom builds. He laser cuts in acrylic, and I sent him the plans for this and a bunch of photographs, and this is what I got back. It's a beautiful model of a beautiful building, and you'll hear about this guy again. And finally, this building over here, this is it's a stand-in right now, but this will be the customs house when I get to rework this building and get it reconfigured and painted white. It will be the customs house. And this is a kit bash structure to represent one of the feed mills that was along Commercial Street. This is the Worthmore Feeds mill. I don't really know what it looked like other than basically the tower. So I've kind of combined a couple different pieces of a couple different kits and some scratch building to make something that looked reasonable. Oh, and the last thing I want to point out, one of the things we bypassed on the way getting down here is about halfway down the peninsula is Harding Steel. So this is right now just a cardboard representation, but eventually I will build a representation of the main Harding Steel plant there, which will probably be about 4 feet long and a foot to a foot and a half wide, going into the backdrop, just to represent this huge structure which was down there as well. So here are just some photographs to give you an idea how things are looking. A little bit closer up on the depot, with all of these have the obligatory Jeeps. This is my representation of the New Meadows River Bridge. It's actually, I know the New Meadows River Bridge, I think, was a deck girder bridge, or is a deck girder bridge. But I've always liked the bridge over the Meadowmack River at Winslow's Mills, so I kind of modified a Central Valley Bridge to represent that, and that's what I've put here for now. Again, I don't know if that'll stay. And then this is one of the crossings coming into a road crossing coming into Bath. This would be Route 1 coming in. Eventually, I'll replace this tower with a model of the actual tower, which is I believe it's at Boothbay now, which was a two-story tall, skinny thing. And these are just kind of imaginary, just to represent something that, as I said, looks right. Okay, so on the other side of the backdrop, so I use the backdrop as a way of things disappearing across the river at Bath. And then on the other side of the backdrop, they come out, the tracks come out in the Wiscasset. And most of you are probably all intimately familiar with Wiscasset. Again, Wiscasset is pretty classic with a long sweeping curve with things laid out. This was the old wharf for the wharf for the 2-foot gauge, the various businesses that were served by both the 2-foot gauge and the Maine Central. So here's the Maine Central right away, the Wiscasset, Waterville, and Farmington right away out here in the river, the Route 1 bridge, the freight house, and the depot. We're down here at the far east or north end of town. And then this is what the model looks like. Here's the Whites Island Bridge, which is just off the picture here, the Whites Island footbridge, and the little trestle over the tidal inlet there, come in, there were a couple section houses across from where the Wiscasset, Waterville, and Farmington Yard used to be. This building that's just mocked up right there will be that building. And then the waterfront buildings, the freight house and the depot. These two are scratch built. These are laser cut kits. Section houses are scratch built. The bridge is scratch built. And then the waterfront. Here's an old picture with the showing it, and then my rendition of it with the freight house here. Route 1 bridge is in between here, and it's truncated. And then, as I said, I want to kind of reproduce some of the classic scenes. So here's some photographs from one of the Melvin books. Train 52 in 1958. Here's a very similar look. For the modern one, the section house is closer than it was in actuality. And then the White's Island Bridge with the causeway and the small bridge over the inlet. So one of the projects I made a lot of progress during COVID, because I was working at home as well as having nowhere to go. So one of the projects I decided to tackle during that was the Sheepscot River Bridge on the north and east side of Wiscasset. I measured this bridge out on Google Earth and determined that it would occupy 11.5 feet of length in HO, which is more than I had to allot for it. So I had 2.5 feet. So this was a major exercise in selective compression. What I've chosen to retain is the large Pennsylvania truss at about half its actual size. The lift bridge segment, there's a little wooden piece just beyond the lift and just beyond the lift bridge segment. So this little piece. So basically, those were the three elements I chose to keep. I dropped the two more conventional, the Warren truss, or not Warren trusses, whatever they're called, the two other trusses, and I came up with this model that's shown on the right, which I think at least represents the look of it without involving the actual size of it. This was all built from Central Valley girder pieces and various pieces of styrene. And when you look at pictures of this bridge, it's all covered with rivets. So each of these pieces is all covered with rivet decals, which took forever to put on there. And I have not even come close to capturing the number of rivets that are on this bridge. But again, it's a representation. Okay, beyond Wiscasset, I decided to skip a couple places. I skipped Newcastle and I skipped Waldoboro. And I went on to Warren, and I chose Warren because it had a few things. One is the loading of limestone from the quarries 8 miles north, which were along the Georges River Railroad originally that terminated here. I wanted to model that. I've always liked the depot, which I think that was, if I remember correctly, that was torn down just in the last year or two. I've always liked that depot. I like the general scene here with the depot and the freight house on opposite sides of the track. So again, this is scratch built. The depot and the freight house both scratch built. This would be essentially the team track. This is a pulpwood car there for loading. I would also commonly have low side gonds, which would be here for loading of limestone. Warren is an odd place. I was surprised when I went there in 2019 because it's nowhere near the town of Warren, and it's kind of out in the middle of nowhere. So I'm not sure actually what was there. I know there were some structures there, but I don't know what really they were. At one point, I know there was an ice house because they harvested ice off the lake, but I don't know. I doubt that was there in 1951. So what I've chosen to do is put a couple generic customers and a couple what I'll call transplanted industry. So one is I just put a small oil jobber here, a freight platform. I know there was a freight platform there because you can still see it in the weeds. This one, you probably can't read it, but this is going to be Bernheimer grain, which was, I believe, in Newcastle. I just have decided to transplant it to Warren just because when I saw this picture, it's too good a structure not to build. So decided to, that's where it's going to go. And so one of these days I will build that. The other industry that I have transplanted to Warren, which actually goes on the other end, is Metamac canning. This is another industry I've had a hard time finding photographs of. I have a number of poor quality photographs like this one in the upper left from the 90s, but I really have no idea what it looked like in the 50s, in the early 50s. So what I've done is I took a Walther's feed mill and I cut it up and reconfigured it into this thing. And eventually I'll put on this structure, this large arch roof structure, which I'm pretty sure based on satellite or aerial photography was there in 1951. So I'll add that on the end here eventually. Just haven't got around to it. So that's my representation of Metamac canning, and therefore we can ship pumpkin. Okay, next stop is Thomaston. Again, photographs here from Melvin's book in the 50s. And again, these structures are all scratch built. So the freight house, as shown in this picture, this is the baggage building, which is behind this building between it and the depot. And the depot, which is now the Historical Society, and was originally part of the Knox, the Henry Knox estate. So this is scratch built from styrene. It's actually a partial buildings. It sits along the backdrop, but you'll notice it has the unusual skewed alignment relative to the tracks, which is inherited from its original purpose. Also in the background here, I've got the Maine State Prison on the backdrop, which sat up on the hill above the tracks west of Thomaston. Over on the other side, this spur it'll have a cannery, the Black and Gay Cannery, and it'll also have the Farmers Union, which is this distinctive building down here in this picture in the lower left. East Thomaston is Dragon Cement, major traffic generator for both the railroad and for the layout. The quarry is not actually visible from where the tracks are. It's actually behind the complex. I was really stumped on what to do about this for the backdrop. Where was I going to get a good picture of a cement plant? Until I had a V8 moment and realized, why don't I just send an email to George Melvin and ask if I can use the picture from the book. So there's the picture from the book and there's the backdrop. So basically just an enlarged version of that picture on the backdrop. And then I'll fill in with some structures, some structures and detail in front to flesh out the rest of the complex. Okay, and the end of the line, Rockland. And Rockland is I don't know how many of you have, looked at early maps of Rockland, but it's a fascinating place. At one point, it had the Lime Rock Railroad completely surrounded the city. serving all the lime kilns, and most of that was gone by 1950. It's got, as I said, when I was 13 years old, I walked around these yards and I knew immediately that they were perfect for modeling, because you can pretty much model it without leaving much out. I think I've left 2 tracks out of the yard. I think there's the actual the prototype yard has 1 more track here and maybe 1 more track in the upper yard here. But other than that, you can characterize it pretty accurately. I've taken a few liberties and things, but and then the Atlantic branch, which was basically the branch that went down to the old Maine Central wharf at Atlantic Point. The wharf, I think, from aerial photographs I've seen, I think the wharf was already a ruin by 1951. But I'm modeling it as if it's still there. If it was gone, it hadn't been gone for that long, I don't believe. There was a sardine packing plant, Holmes Packing, which sat out here. There was also a Standard Oil terminal in here, and I've added a few other things. One thing I've added on the layout that I don't think is prototypically accurate is creameries. I know there was the Turner Center Creamery in Wiscasset. I don't know if there was a creamery in Rockland or Brunswick, but I've added them because I like to run milk cars on my passenger trains. I suspect from what I've seen that any milk cars that came out here were actually handled on freights, because I've seen a map of milk train routes and this branch is not included. But that is one of the compromises that I made just because it's something I want. Just some Rockland yard scenes. So here's the prototype scenes. Again, these are in the 50s. So this is the upper yard looking towards the end, the roundhouse. Here's the roundhouse. This is actually started out as a Bartlett roundhouse that I totally reconfigured to make it something more similar to Brunswick. This structure over here is kind of a kit bash scratch built thing to represent the farmers co-op on the other side. And I'll look towards the lower yard, the stub end yard. I've got a stand-in building here for this storehouse. There was apparently a coal dock over here in the background, from what I understand, and I've put one in, which is back up this track here. There's the scratch built freight house. This is another depot laser cut acrylic by the guy I worked with in Florida to do this, and I'll show you a couple more close-ups of that in a second. So here's the depot. There's the prototype, which again is still there, and in service. And then here's the model. Again, this is I was really happy with these models. What I did on this one is basically I had photographed this several times. I took straight on photographs as best I could last time I was there, and assembled them. Essentially drew plans for it, which I provided to this fella to build the actual structure. The backdrop here is a composite of pictures from around Rockland or from Google Earth. Here's the big hotel that still stands there. I don't know what it's called. It's closer on the layout to the yard than it was in actuality, but I can live with that. And this picture is one of my favorite pictures. I took this. It's hanging on the wall in a little sailing museum that's down by the waterfront in Rockland. I don't know when it was taken. I presume it was probably during the war or somewhere around that time. But this is the General Seafood Shipyard with the ships on their whatever railways they're called. This was, I think, a lobster company and maybe also some more shipyard. Here's the Maine Central Pier. Here's the Standard Oil Standard Oil tanks there, and that would have been the Standard Oil dock, and then the sardine packing company would be farther along. Note this building. So when I've tried to represent this on the layout, this is still in its early stages. Obviously, this is the sardine cannery, Holmes Packing. This is the Maine Central, my representation of the Maine Central Pier, at least as of right now. This is my representation of that building. It's actually a kit from Colorado Craftsman kits, based on a shipyard in I think Amesbury, Mass. And I made some modifications and additions to it to make it look a little bit more like that building that was in the structure. So at least it's kind of similar. And then various other things in the background. So, okay, before we go on to the last session, any questions on that part?
I don't know about that, but just to backtrack for a minute, Rich, just because I think I was taking a biological break at your first one, but that supermarket you talked about in Brunswick is Hannaford.
Yeah, good. Thank you. I knew as soon as I heard it, I remember the name. I couldn't pull that out. Yeah, we don't have that.
Yeah, and then someone piped in to mention that the Rockland station is now a restaurant.
Oh, the whole thing is a restaurant. Wow, that's got to be big. Okay, cool. Yeah, it's had a number of lives. Okay, anything else on that? Anything else? Okay, so the last piece of this is on operating this beast. So as I said, this is really what I built this for. A big part of the hobby for me is getting together with people and trying to simulate how the railroads actually did things. And so for train control, we're trying to do it the way the railroad did it, which was timetable and train order. It was not CTC territory, so everything was done with pre-scheduled timetable for certain trains, and then written train orders for other things. For car forwarding, which I'm not going to talk about, we use waybills and car cards. I typically run a crew of 8, so I have a dispatcher, 2-person crew running Brunswick Yard, 1 person in Rockland Yard, and then 4 road crews. And the road crews, during the course of a 4-hour session, they all get to run, kind of a mixture of trains: a branch line freight, a branch line passenger train, and usually a mainline train, which just is going from staging to staging through Brunswick. And one of the concessions that we always have to make on the model is that we never have as much room as the real thing. So the passing tracks at Wiscasset and Bath really control the maximum length of trains, which come out to about 11 cars, which in this particular case is not too bad a concession, because from what I've seen, there were an awful lot of trains that were probably about that length. There were some that were certainly longer than that, but it's not like taking a 100-car train and compressing it down to 10. It's taking maybe a 20-car train and compressing it down to 10 or 11. So that works out pretty well. So I've gathered over the years, kind of a collection of timetables and train orders for the Maine Central that I kind of use as the source material for this. So this is the timetable from I forget which. This is probably an early 50s employee timetable for the Rockland branch, and a couple examples of train orders. So in this particular case, this one's specifying a meet between passenger trains 52 and 55 at Wrights. This one here is basically telling train 324, which was a westbound freight, that it didn't need to protect against any extras up to a certain time period, a certain time. And so we try to mimic this kind of stuff. So on the implementation of this on the layout is we've got a timetable. So this is not the most current one, but probably the previous issue of the timetable with times for the scheduled trains, which would be the 4 passenger trains and 1 third class freight 324. We've also got clearance card. I don't know what a Maine Central clearance card actually looked like, but that's a fairly generic one. And I've made up forms for Form 19s for the train orders that we fill out for the various trains. And we've got essentially train order signals. They're manual. It's basically a box on the layout fascia where we can put the train order and flip the signal to red so that a passing crew can know to stop and get their new orders. We run a 3-to-1 fast clock, so that means that 20 minutes, 20 actual minutes corresponds to an hour of time. So a 4-hour operating session is essentially 12 hours. One of the things I find really useful and really neat are the dispatcher's records. I showed you one earlier. This is another one I picked up off of eBay, I think, a while back. This one's from 1950. I put this one in here just because I think it's neat. This one actually has, instead of just the regular passenger trains, 52, 4, and 6, and their counterparts, it also has a section of the Bar Harbor Express. Which this was a Pullman train. It went out to Rockland and arrived about 8 o'clock in the morning on Saturday morning, and it came back Sunday evening. This must have been kind of a nice way to spend the weekend. So I thought that was pretty cool, because in this case I have the dispatcher's record for the whole weekend, for Saturday and Sunday. And then this is on the right is kind of the schedule of trains that we run within a 4-hour session. We don't always get through all of them, but we get as far as we can. We've got a series of trains on the Rockland branch, which include the numbered trains, which are the timetable trains, and then the symbol trains like KN1, KJ1, NK3, which are essentially the freights which ran as extras. And approximate times they depart, although these float around depending on what's going on the layout. Lewiston branch had one freight turn that basically came in from Rigby, came around the Y at Lewiston and headed out to Lewiston branch and switched all the industries out there. This job usually takes one operator about half the session, because they're basically out there on their own. That's all they have to do, and they're just working out the switching puzzle. And then these are the Portland Division main lines. These are the lower road freights. All these things that say E and a number or W and a number, that's just the staging tracks. So those are things that are off the visible part of the layout. And one way we can express this is looking at what's called a string diagram, which is basically a way of just graphically showing these trains. So these are the scheduled trains or the timetable trains. And then you add in the extras, which I've just shown in dashes. Kind of gives you an idea of what's meeting where. So for instance, KN1 usually departs about 7 a.m. on the fast clock. It goes to Bath and basically sits in the hole while it waits for the 2 passenger trains to go by. And then it proceeds on to do its work out the rest of the branch. Likewise, this extra, which is KJ1, JK2, basically goes to Bath. It works in Bath. It has to stay out of the way of train 324, which is the timetable train, and then it heads back into Brunswick. The times I've had to shift around just because of the length limitations don't allow you to mimic things exactly. And then this is a dispatcher's record from one of our recent operating sessions. So basically, I built up the form that's essentially the same as what the railroad actually used. And the dispatcher fills this out with communications from each of the locations as to the times that each train is in town working and doing its thing. So this session was about a week and a half ago. So that's about all I had to say about that. I think I'll just close with a couple slides. So since I am retired now, I can be a little ambitious. I already told you that I'm going to extend the Lewiston Lower Branch, so that piece is in here. That's this piece that'll be added in. And a future possible project is to actually expand the main line, the lower road, all the way south to Yarmouth Junction. So basically, right now my staging representing Portland is right here. But I have the other half of the basement that I haven't used, and most of this I can put along the wall. I can actually put staging over here and basically build south to model Freeport and to model Yarmouth Junction with the Grand Trunk, which I think would be pretty cool because it would actually give people operating these mainline trains, rather than just going from staging into Brunswick into staging, they actually get to open up and run some mainline. And work these couple other places. I'm still researching what was at Freeport. I know what was there in the 20s, but I don't really have an idea what was still there in the in 1951. So I'll dig into that. I probably have to contact the Historical Society and see. But anyway, that would be the next phase of expansion after Lewiston is done. But we'll see if that happens. So I'll just close with these couple pictures. So this was Wiscasset in 2019, and there it is on the layout. So I kind of consider this my little time capsule in my basement, and hopefully it represents some vision of reality, some version of reality. And thanks for listening. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Rich, for presenting to us. One other comment that came in was somebody mentioned that in the 50s they thought Hannaford was Cottles, still on the same site, and that the Eagle Hotel was not there. But I'm not native, so it's all moot to me. But
I think it was still there, but it was burned. It did have a fire. They had a fire in 1940. And I know it burned the towers, or one of the towers. And they turned, what they did is they basically chopped it off, because it used to have turrets on the top. And they chopped it off to these flat top towers. But I think there are pictures that still show it, because I know there are pictures, because there are pictures of passenger trains pulled by E7s with the hotel in the background. So that would date it as at least the late 40s, at least. But I'm pretty sure they were green E7s, so it'd be later than that.
Well, I'm the one who made a comment about the Eagle Hotel, and I appreciate your correction on that score. I'm pretty sure, though, that they had used that lot back behind there for a grocery store at that time. It was Cottles.
Oh, that could be. Yeah, that could very easily be. Yeah, sure.
I just assumed that it had eaten up that Eagle Hotel lot.
Yeah.
But I have to say, I'm most impressed with what you've done here. It's pretty amazing to me. I'm a Maine Central fan too. I live in Bodenham, about a half mile from the lower road.
Yeah.
And I work in Z scale.
Oh, okay.
1 to 220. And it's a little hard because you can't get stock engines and cars very much that for MEC. Right. You have to paint them all, and it's a shaky hand operation to do that,
especially in Z scale.
Yeah, and I did a kind of a freestyle prototype layout to show some typical trains running through. Now I'm working on an exact layout of the Maine Central, which was very simple, in Bodenham, based on a 1953 aerial.
Cool.
And which is, invaluable find.
Yeah.
I think in Saginaw County, which also includes Bath, I think they did an agriculture department aerial photograph flyover in that year. So
Oh,
there's
okay.
some data out there. I'm not completely sure of that or what the limits are of that.
Yeah, I use a site online called Historic Aerials.
Yeah, that's where I got that one.
Yeah, they have it depends what where you're going to, what years they have and things like that. But it's a great resource to be able to just see how things change through time. And I love the research aspect of it. I think and one of the things I like about the Maine Central as a modeling subject is partly that a big part of it is that not everything is available out there, and that you have to do the work to create things that represent the prototype.
Yeah, that's for sure.
That's a big driver.
Yeah.
I mean, for years, I always thought I was always fascinated by modeling Colorado narrow gauge.
Yeah, right.
And the reason was because it was scratch builder's paradise. But then what happened is all the kits came out, everything became available via Blackstone, and I lost interest in it because you can all buy it now. I like to be able to have to build things and figure out what they look like and things like that. So.
Yeah, right. You live in Golden, right? Golden?
Yeah.
Colorado?
Yeah.
I'm going to be out there late in March, I think, early April. Do you have some contact information you could provide the group so I could get in touch with you?
Sure, I will do that. Yeah. I'll just put it in the chat. I'd love to have a visitor. That'd be awesome.
Great. I'll contact you. My name's Kevin Twine.
Okay. Nice to meet you, Kevin.
Nice to meet you too.
Hi, Rich. Andrew Davison here. I want to say I think your choices on compression and representation are really great because I lived in Maine for a while. I'm not living there now. I'm actually in Utah, so closer to you than most of other people. It really captures the feel, and I know that's what you're going for in a lot of instances. I did have one specific modeling question though, which is what do you do to represent the water? Are you is it mostly just a paint at this point? Are you using resin at all? And tell us if you could tell us a little bit about how you approach that.
So what I'm doing is I'm painting it. So what I'm doing is I basically have a couple shades of blue that I kind of thought looked reasonable based on photographs and things. One that's darker that I use for fresh water because of the tan, and the one that's a little bit bluer for the ocean. And essentially what I'm doing is painting and then going back and highlighting the edges with, kind of washes and mixtures of browns and tans and things like that to, kind of give the depth. And then I'm just putting on multiple coats of Mod Podge,
Okay.
which is basically just it's a gloss coat. And I'm not doing resin. And the reason I'm not is that, if you think about it, and this has been pointed out by people that model, like the Midwest as well, is that, you really can't see very far down into the water. I mean, it's fairly opaque, if you will. And so if you're modeling a clear mountain stream, yeah, I can see resin, but I've opted to just go with basically a gloss paints covered with a good multiple coats of gloss coat.
Got it. Thank you.
And actually, now I think about it, I'm not using Mod Podge right now. I have done that in the past. I'm using, I think it's another brand of gloss coat. There's one out there that's called, that the brand is Golden, which I've heard really good things about. I use a different one. I can't remember the name of it, but anyway, they're a little shinier than Mod Podge is.
Great.
And the other thing I do, sorry about that, is the other thing I do is to give it a little bit of texture. The gloss coat is pretty viscous. So what I do is, after I put my initial coat of paint on, I will then do the first coat of gloss coat, and I will just kind of dab with a large, fairly large brush. And so it creates a little texture on the surface, if you know what I mean, because it doesn't even out completely. And then I'll go over it with another coat of paint. So I basically end up with a kind of a textured surface. And then finally a smooth coat of gloss coat over the top.
Well, it works. Thank you.
Yeah.
Got a question, Richard, for you. This is Al.
Yeah.
You talked about the Bar Harbor Express going down to Rockland for the weekend. What was the route of travel from Bar Harbor or Ellsworth to get down there?
Say that again. I didn't catch that.
How did the Bar Harbor Express get down to Rockland?
I think I'm not totally sure. I've never really researched it, but I assume they had a section that split off, probably at Portland. They probably had certain cars that were destined for Ellsworth and other cars that were destined for Rockland during summer months, is I think what I've read. Somebody else might know better on that one.
Okay, I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think that was the arrangement, but it was pretty much a summer thing most of the time. And if I remember correctly, I forget what month that was. July 22nd. So that would be a summer month.
And one other thing, you talked about the Rumbo Mill there in Lisbon. That burned in July of '87.
Okay. Yeah.
I was at that fire.
Oh, were you? Were you a fireman? Yeah, I was kind of disappointing when I was there in 2019. It's like all there are burned remnants of some of this stuff. So, but well.
Well, that was the main part, isn't it? Some more of it burnt a little later in time, so I'm not sure when that part of it burned.
Yeah. Well, if anybody finds themselves out that way and want a little taste of home, there's my email and phone number. So feel free to contact me. I'm always open for visitors.
Rich, on behalf of the club, I just want to thank you for taking the time out tonight to present to us. I know a few questions showed that I wasn't the only one paying attention, and I don't know, maybe you'll get me a little more motivation than the 3 pieces of bench work I see sitting over in the corner.
Yeah. Yep. I understand.
Well, thanks again, Rich. It was a great presentation. And then for those of you who are still with us, and Rich included, just to remember that next month is our annual business meeting. So hope to see you all there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.